Hey, welcome back. Again, it is the phenomenal fifth episode of the Bourgeois Gentleman's Reading Room. Um, I'm Ray, and as always, behind the camera, the koala. It's me. So a little while ago, we were talking about revival, and now we're going to talk about probably one of my most favorite things in the world. It is the first piece of comic book memorabilia that I had ever bought with my own money that wasn't a comic book. And that is this lovely, uncanny X-Men poster. It's from 1989. It was drawn by one of my all-time favorite artists, Art Adams, who, if you don't know anything of Art Adams, you're just not living, you know. You're living a sad life. But I bring this up because not only is it awesome, and as you can see, it's definitely been used. The corners are all mangled and everything. I actually took it out of the frame, but it hangs in my bedroom. Despite what anyone says or recommends, I refuse to let it go. But I bring it up because it comes from a completely different time in Marvel. Marvel was starting to switch over, and they were starting to yeah. A quick note that Shaolin threw out. If you'll notice, Psylocke is still white, and not because I like white chicks with purple hair, but that's my favorite Psylocke. I'm actually not a big fan of Asian ninja Betsy Braddock. It just, kind of makes me uncomfortable. Revenge! God, I hope I didn't ruin the sound on that. I just yelled into the mic. That's awful. But as I was saying, this actually was just a completely different time for Marvel. And if you may not remember, like, these X-Men would do all sorts of stuff. Like, Chris Claremont was pretty much running the X universe. He was basically the editor of that department. He had started New Mutants and was writing that for a little while, then switched over. I believe Lois Simonson was writing it. Then started X Factor, and again handed over to Lois Simonson. And these were all great books, but they were under his care. He was handling X-Men, but it was a time when he basically sort of wrote whatever. And I bring this up because I think about Marvel today, and they've got some space stuff going on. I mean, Carol Danvers is in space. They've got Guardians of the Galaxy. They do some stuff about the strangest book they have is maybe Uncanny Avengers, which is a pretty interesting book, and actually is one of my favorite titles. Rick Remender right now is, like, I don't know the guy, but I feel like he's writing way above his head. Like, that book is just amazing, and I'm so geeked for Axis, which dropped today. But I'm super geeked for that, and it's a really good book, and it does different things, but I feel like there's something missing from Marvel. If you look back in the day, Marvel had this series called Defenders, and it's probably, outside of X-Men, probably my favorite comic book series of all time. And if you read all the Defenders, and I highly recommend going to a con and going through dollar bins and just picking up books of it, because it's honestly, it's one of the most batshit titles you'll ever read. I mean, they talk about the occult. They got the six-fingered hand. They had women issues in there. They had Valkyrie, one of my favorite comics characters, and they had Hellcat, Damien Hellstrom, whose dad was the devil, and who was desperately in love with Patsy Walker, Hellcat, and they might have been brother and sister, but they kind of did it anyway. And dude, anything and everything that could happen happened in this book, and a lot of that happened in X-Men too. They had the Brood, and they spent like a year in space, and that's how the New Mutants got started, because the X-Men got swept away in space, and Professor X thought that, the X-Men were dead, so I'm going to start over. But what I've noticed as of late is where is that Defenders book? Where's that book that's quirky? Where's that book that just does stuff and sort of caters to a niche crowd? And I understand that Marvel needs to make money. They do. They're a publishing company. But I think about companies like Image and think, hey, they make Revival. And Revival is a standalone book that takes place in Wausau County, Wisconsin. I don't know if you've ever been to Wisconsin. I don't know if any of you know anything about Wisconsin. There's nothing there except the Wisconsin Badgers and the Green Bay Packers. Nothing is there. Oh, and cheese. They've got lots and lots of cheese. But outside of that, there's nothing there. This is a book that could stand alone in the Marvel Universe and really... the Avengers could show up, actually. You could have lower level superheroes, D-list superheroes come in. This book's been pretty successful. And I think back to those times and think that, Marvel had tons of superhero books, but they always had that one book that was a little bit different. And even some of their superhero books dealt with some quirky stuff. Shaolin's favorite X-Men, the X-Babies, were introduced in there. Excalibur came out of that, which were basically, the washed up X-Men. A lot of these things took place during this time period. And I just sort of miss that. Marvel's mostly now going with whatever the movie properties are. And it's whatever the hot hand is, and that's what we're going to do, and they're going to be superheroes. And I'd kind of like to see something different. I'd like to see... Matt Fraction, a while back, did a Defender series, and it got canceled. And I get it. The numbers were low. But sometimes you have to stick with that quirky series. Sometimes you have to stick with that book and give it time to get some traction so that it can gain that following. And I always think, hey, if you've got this following now, you've just expanded your base. Catering just to superhero guys, catering just to people who only like superheroes, narrows your base immensely. It means you're just catering to me. And the truth is, what you're telling me is that if I only like the Avengers, or if I only like X-Men, and I only like Wolverine, or if I read those books, not if I only like them, if I read those books, then I only like them. I can't possibly like a book about Wausau County, Wisconsin, or I can't like a book like, House of Mystery from Vertigo, or I can't like a book like Nowhere Men or Great Pacific. This isn't to knock Marvel. I'm a Marvel guy. If you go through any number of my comic books, you'll see that 90% of them are Marvel books. But the truth of the matter is, Image right now is putting out some really great, quirky stuff. Great Pacific is phenomenal. Phenomenal. Revival's phenomenal. Nowhere Men, if it ever comes back, is fantastic. And I always think Marvel can do these books. They always sort of get there, but then they cancel it. It'd just be nice to see them do a little bit more. And Shelley just shot me another note, and she's right. Marvel's kind of becoming MTV. I don't need 67 Spider-Man books. What I need is, a Defenders book. What I need is a quirky book that talks about the six-fingered hand and quite possibly has an incestuous love relationship between a brother and a sister who actually turn out not to be brothers and sisters. But it also dealt with domestic violence, and it hit cities, real cities. And I don't mean fake cities. Like, part of the Defenders' home base for a little while was Montclair, New Jersey, which was fantastic. If you're a dude from northern New Jersey, you know where Montclair is. You're like, sweet, Montclair, New Jersey. I know where that is. I get drunk there. I'm from there. It dealt with the Pine Barrens. It was relatable. It was a great book. And, I just like to, not to sound like an old fogey, but honestly, I kind of like to see us go back to the days when we are these X-Men. I mean, these X-Men had Longshot. Let's be honest. Longshot's hilarious. And speaking of which, Peter David, bring back Longshot. Really? Really? Why can't he come back? You wrote him phenomenally in X Factor. The new X Factor series, by the way, is fantastic. That's also another different, quirky, strange series. But the funny thing about that is it's quirky for superheroes. Like, it's still a superhero book, but it's still fantastic. Peter David, I love you. I hope they don't cancel that book because it's fucking fantastic. Fantastic. I love Batshit Polaris. Oh, man. God. What I wouldn't give to have a white chick with green hair just be batshit around me. Ugh. Good times. Anyway, on that offensive note, I'm going to call it quits for now. Take another little sip of my drink, and we'll be back, and we're going to wrap things up. But until then, rural.